Off in the cloud you go. Okay. Smile, be pretty, be pretty, behave yourselves. Okay. Anybody, we're just having a, thanks to Michael, we're having a fascinating discussion about the differences between tropical and sidereal slash Vedic astrology. Um, and if you really wanted to sit down and try to figure it out, you could probably use an astrological program to figure out exact and get some point where spring equinox is. Of course, you're still looking at zero Aries, but what does the spring equinox represent? It represents the point where the sun is at 0 degrees declination. And so it's kind of like when I think of it in terms of when it crosses the equator, though that may not be an exact or best way to look at it. But yeah, uh, but our tropical astrology is based on it takes the solar approach, which by calendar divides Europe into 12 months. And we have this point that says 0 Aries is the spring equinox, 0 Libra is the fall equinox, and the sun is so spring equinox, sun is rising, getting higher in the sky. Um, Fall equinox is when the sun crosses and starts to go even, it's been going lower all along, but it's going to go lower still as it crosses over the ecliptic or in some ways the Earth's equator. And the summer solstice is when it's at its highest point, winter solstice when it's at its lowest point for us. Okay. Anybody got any announcements? Anything they want to bring up before we get into our program? We've got quite a bit to look at.
Well, I was just going to mention that AFA last bulletin had my book in there as coming soon.
Oh, great.
New releases.
All right. Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'll be glad to see it out before the election.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I am going to share screen. Look at me. I'm remembering how to do this. I think I remember come on. Here we go. Share. Come on. There we go. Move you over a scotch. Go into slideshow mode. Here we go. All right, so today we want to talk about the 12 houses and the more than 20 different house systems. And no, we're not going to actually look at all 20. That would be a lot of charts and take a long time. Here we go. Wave. Okay, so again, anybody have any? So Cornelia just mentioned that the AFA publication it talks about her new book. It should be out shortly. Anybody have any other announcements that care to make? Okay, I'm going to look at some of the upcoming astrological events, and I added charts for the 2 eclipses that are coming up, so we could take a quick look at them as well before we get into houses. So here we go. Oh, stop that. Okay. Well, that date's wrong. Silly me. Okay, so Tuesday night, of course, is the presidential debate, 9 p.m. Philadelphia, if you want to look at a chart for it. On 9/11, it's the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. Mercury's going to leave their shadow and moon wobble will begin. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. On the 12th, the sun makes a waxing crisis of action square to Jupiter, and Jupiter's already in their shadow, meaning they're going to go retrograde shortly, and when they do, they will go back over all this space again. On the 14th, Venus makes an air trine to Jupiter. On the 17th, we have the fall harvest supermoon lunar eclipse, 25 Pisces 41. So the harvest moon is the one closest to the autumnal equinox, and that happens to be this one on September 17th. It's also going to be a supermoon. We've got 4 supermoons in a row. Supermoon is when the full moon is within 10% of its closest approach to the Earth.
Now this lunar eclipse falls in Kamala's 10th house.
Let's hope that's a good thing.
I hope so
The
too.
October full moon is also going to be a supermoon, and it's going to be the one that is actually closest to the Earth at the time of the full moon. This can best be appreciated if you see it as it's rising or setting, because the atmosphere helps to magnify it. Once it gets up, it doesn't really look all that much bigger typically. Let's see, on the September 18th, Mercury will oppose retrograde Saturn. On the 19th, the sun will make a waxing Earth trine to retrograde Uranus. And on the 20th, it will oppose Neptune. 21st, Mercury waxing mutable square shadow Jupiter, and the sun will make a waning Earth trine to retrograde Pluto. Then the sun goes void of course, enters Libra on the 22nd. When Venus will be making a waning square to retrograde Pluto, then Venus goes void of course before entering Scorpio, also on the 22nd. So the 22nd could be kind of active because you got the sun and Venus both changing signs. 24th, Mercury waxing Earth trine Uranus. 25th, Mercury opposes Neptune and then will make a waning Earth trine to retrograde Pluto. Goes void of course and enters Libra on the 26th. Mars waxing water trine retrograde Saturn on the 29th. On the 30th, we have the Mercury superior conjunction Sun. That's when Mercury is at direct and on the far side of the Sun. So it appears, we're looking from the Earth, we see the Sun and Mercury in a straight line. So that's the superior conjunction. Mercury or superior conjunction is when Mercury or Venus is on the far side of the Sun. The inferior conjunction is when they're retrograde and on the near side, orbiting between the Earth and the Sun. So they are different. They have different characteristics. You can almost think of the superior conjunction as more of a opposition. On October 2nd, we have cardinal new moon solar eclipse. The sun at 10 Libra 4 minutes. It's a partial eclipse, so not a total. And we won't see any of it here because it's actually down in the southern hemisphere, South Pacific parts. It'll be visible in parts of South America, extreme South America, but most of it's going to be in the South Pacific, near South America. On the 4th, Mars will enter his shadow, and Venus will make a waning water trine to retrograde Saturn. Now, Mars isn't going to go retrograde until December, but he's going to be spending 2 months going over the same territory that he's going to retrace his steps over, starting in December and lasting into next year. And then he's got to go forward again. So, yeah, that could be a rather interesting time. And I think he's going to be out of bounds part of that as well. On October 5th, Mercury waxing cardinal square shadow Mars. October 8th, Venus waxing water trine shadow Mars, Mercury waxing air trine stationing Jupiter. And then on the 9th of October, Jupiter will station retrograde at 21 Gemini 2016, which is pretty close to my natal Uranus, actually. It's a few minutes shy, so I guess it won't matter. Jupiter spends 4 weeks basically at 21 Gemini. So if you got something at 21 Gemini or close to that, or 21 of any of the other mutable signs or the air signs,
Well,
those could be an interesting 4 weeks.
Kamala has her ascendant at 2024 Gemini, so it'll be in
Hmm.
her 12th house.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've thought about that because there's this thing called rephrenation where as a planet approaches an aspect, you may start to feel it and you have this anticipation of something happening. But because the aspect doesn't actually materialize, because it doesn't happen uh, as the planet goes retrograde and backs off, there's
Mhm.
this can be a sense of some disappointment. You have to wait for something. Something has maybe longer in coming. Let's just hope it's not the positive outcome to the election. Uh, so it's interesting to think about it. What happens if we don't have a final decision on inauguration day? Who then takes over?
Right.
Does the Because the president's done, and the newly elected president, whoever being undetermined, let's say, it can't take over because you don't know who it's going to be yet. But does that mean that Kamala will take over as the vice president, filling in until such time as it is resolved? Or
Wait,
will it instead defer to the Speaker of the House?
how would that happen though? Because you remember Florida and the hanging chads, you would have to
Oh,
say
yeah.
more of a nail biter than that. It
Yes,
there
that went
there
to
are
the Supreme
scenarios
Court.
where, let's say, just hypothetically, let's say maybe Trump wins, and then Kamala Harris is the vice president, and then it's almost like a deja vu of 4 years ago, where Mike Pence would refuse to follow Trump and to not certify the election. He did certify it.
Well,
What if
there,
Kamala Harris would say, "Well, Trump said he's going to be a dictator, so therefore she is not going to certify the election"? There could be that kind of potential, purely
yeah,
potential.
there could be, she could pull a 45 on him and say, I'm not going to certify the election because
Right,
your
right.
people interfered with the actual voting process, and those issues are still to be decided. So,
That would be
but that
chaos.
happened, yeah. So it'll be interesting. It could be a fun time. Certainly interesting. Finally, on October 11th, Pluto, 29 Capricorn, 38, 31, will station direct. If you're keeping tabs, he's spending 11 weeks at 29 Capricorn.
Which is in conjunct Trump's chart, ascendant.
Yeah. Yes. So interesting times. 13 October 13th, that's our next meeting. Our tentative plan is to talk about the 12 signs and the mythology and their story. And how they got their names from the constellations and so on. Mercury will make a waning square to Pluto, then go void of course, enter Scorpio. Sun will make a waxing air trine to retrograde Jupiter. Uh, because of the number of aspects, those dates at the bottom there, September 11, 13, 14, 19, 21, 22, 24, and 26, plus October 5th, 8th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th look to be the most active days. Because there you'll have multiple major aspects, and in many of those dates, you'll also have some minor quincunx inconjunct aspects, which just help add some extra spice to life. Any questions about the calendar? Moving right along. Here we go. Oh, chaos. Yes. I thought, we should talk a little bit about chaos. since Mars is actually out of bounds right now, in fact, Mars went void of course on September 4th, from 9 a.m. to 12:46 p.m. Mars was void of course as he transitioned from Gemini to Cancer. But then on the 5th, he went out of bounds. He's out of bounds north, um, and will be out of bounds north until the 18th. Short out of bounds period. Usually he's out of bounds longer than that, but this is just kind of like testing the waters, it seems. And keep in mind that when a planet's out of bounds, it's no longer bound by the sun to follow the normal interpretations. So we're looking at a period where you could have potentially extremes of Martian type activity.
Yep. Which is going over my ascendant in Venus.
How you doing, Cornelia? You've been misbehaving, have you?
With this
Um,
heat, no, I've been mostly staying in.
hey, smart lady. Yeah, we stay in a lot too. We go out late at night, which is
Yeah.
fine. You know, we're in our vampire mode right now. Hibernate in the daytime, go out at night. Um, so yeah, so I noticed I was curious about that because then what was it? It was the day after September 6th was the shooting in Georgia at the high school. And that is going to be interesting because they charged the father with manslaughter and accessory to murder or something to that extent, I think. Lots coming out about the family environment, which has been one of the more dysfunctional Georgia families. So it should prove interesting.
Is it,
Um,
isn't that where Trump's Venus conjunct Saturn is, 8 Cancer?
it's close to that, yeah. Yeah,
Well, that should be interesting.
yeah. Okay, so also then we have moon wobble starting on the 11th. Moon wobble is an odd phenomenon that was discovered by mathemat astrologer was also a mathematician back in the 30s. Now I'm trying to remember. I think it was either Carter or Jandro, but I don't remember which one for sure. Who found that when the sun is either uh, basically applying to or separating from a conjunction or square to either of the nodes, that there seems to be an increase in extreme events, uh, extreme weather events, high casualty, natural disasters, airplane crashes, things of that nature. Um, and so there is no established orb for it. You won't find a whole lot written about it. You can find a little bit online about the idea of the moon wobble, um, which is interesting because it has nothing to do with the moon wobbling per se, because it has to do with the sun relative to the lunar nodes. But like the Earth, the moon does wobble a bit in its orbit. And I just saw something today where apparently, it's moving away from the Earth, its orbit. Gradually, it's getting farther and farther from us by, like a fraction of an inch. So it's going to be with us for quite a while. So I personally use something called in or under the beams, which depending again on which source you look at, it's going to be somewhere between 15 and 17 degrees, or days. So um, it's this moon wobble is basically should be in effect from probably around September 11th, the evening of September 11th to the morning of October 16th, 5 weeks. So just be extra careful, pay attention, watch the news. If we're going to have our big one, that could be a time for it. But okay. Any questions on the chaos? Okie dokie, folks. Here we go. Here's the partial lunar eclipse on September 17th. This is for LA. And what's nice is that the moon will be exact opposition to the sun as it rises. So, go out on the 17th and watch for moonrise. Find yourself a nice spot and look at her as she comes up big. And she'll probably be, a little more towards the goldish orangish order. Of course, it'll depend too on, what's going on here on planet Earth as far as possible fires or the like that could add contaminants to the atmosphere that will change the hue of the moon. I'm not saying it's going to be red, but it could be a red. And let's see, it's going to be rising pretty much due east. If you know where east is, or slightly to the south of east, which means lower. Um, any questions, any thoughts?
I have a T-square. I don't like it.
Yeah, well, that's the way life goes, and the other thing too is that Mars is actually unaspected. It doesn't make any aspect to any of the planets, but it is squaring the nodes
Hmm.
and the ascendant descendant axis of the time. So yeah, that's interesting. But you can see, excuse me, from the chart, you got the sun at 25 Virgo, south node at 6 Libra. So that's about 11 degrees. And on the opposite side, of course, the moon is about 11 degrees from the north node. That's a little far for a total lunar eclipse. So it's a partial eclipse. But it should be rising in the shadow. So that will also be interesting to watch. So that should give it more of a grayish hue, perhaps. So here then is the October 2nd solar eclipse. 10 Libra 4. Oh, look, Mercury's going to be right on my midheaven.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Jim, could you go back to the other one for a second?
Sure. There you go.
Now Mars, it's 7 Cancer.
Yeah, 7 Cancer 48.
It's right on Trump's Mercury.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't seem like he's gonna be anything but angry all the time.
Yeah, he's just going to be angry. He's going to spout. I mean, that's how he fires up that core base of his. And I don't want to call them all functionally illiterate just because they believe whatever numbers he throws out. But yeah, I find it interesting that the Democrats don't seem to be doing more about challenging all these numbers and facts that he puts out that aren't facts. I did find it interesting that apparently they were flying. Oh, even today, I guess it was yesterday, they were having airplanes flying banners over the big football games from the Harris Walz campaign. Uh, they were because it was Ohio State was playing at Michigan, so they had a big banner flying over the stadium in Michigan. Go Michigan, Trump, Ohio, something to that effect. So they're using some interesting new tactics and trying to reach out to people. I know I read somewhere where the Republicans, Trump had insisted that they spend money for ads around Mar-a-Lago, so I guess so he could watch himself on television when he's home. And so the Democrats are spending money as well for that same TV area, countering his ads. And of course, you know, Ron DeSantis is in Florida, the governor of Florida is not doing anything to make himself any more popular um, with some of the things that he's signed in recently. So I don't know. There's that what's it, the reassessment for homes and the condos and the like, which can cost people upwards of $100,000.
Ah,
Which I'm sorry, most of these people that you got retirees down there living on a fixed income, they can't afford that. Um, it's a weird thing. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but Ron signed the bill, so it must be good, right? Uh, okay, here's the back to the solar eclipse. Here we go. Mars is now at 15 Cancer. One, two, three. So I've got 4 retrograde planets. On the 2nd, Jupiter's getting ready to change direction, barely moving at all. He's at 21 Gemini, which is where he will be stationing. So he's really in the process of stationing at this point. Any comments before we jump along? Okay. Next up, here's a map of the eclipse. So you can see where the eclipse lines are. So yeah, we won't. This is for the solar eclipse, so we won't see it
could we
unless
look
you
at the
really want to
eclipse?
go down south.
Did we, I want to ask something about the eclipse again. Did we talk about it and I missed it?
Yeah.
Isn't there a trine going on there? Let me, we go back for just a second? Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
We have a grand water trine.
right, right. Okay. And I was also wondering about, what was the other thing? I saw that and I saw something else I wanted to express an idea about. Um, I guess when I
Grand
was
Earth
talking,
sign too.
the Grand Water Trine, 2 of them are exact within a degree. Where's the other one we're digging up for this?
There's a grand Earth trine too.
Because I see the trine between Mars and Saturn, which I think is good news in the chaos part, but what's the
Okay, so you
other
got
aspect? We need a Scorpio and Venus. I think it's a pretty big spread to get 4 out
yeah,
of Venus with a lot of power. I don't know. What
well,
was the
it's yeah. So this is creating it from Venus at 11 Scorpio to Mars at 15 Cancer to Saturn at 14 Pisces. But Saturn's retrograde, so you could
well,
misbehave a bit. But there's
we think
the
it over
grand.
a lot.
You also have the grand Earth trine using the midheaven, which is 29
Right.
Virgo and then 29 Cancer for Pluto and 26 Taurus for Uranus, which basically creates the Star of David.
Yeah, it does.
And what does that mean?
Second coming, I don't know. Um,
The Ubers would have a thought on that.
oh
I don't
yeah,
have time to look it up,
I'm
but
sure somebody will say something about that. Yeah,
yeah.
something will come up at some point, and they'll go off on a long tangent. Who knows? Maybe it is the yeah.
I have a real
If
quick question, Jim. When
yeah,
you mentioned that Capricorn will be 11 weeks at 29 degrees Capricorn, right?
yeah,
Someone mentioned that Trump's Capricorn is in 29 degrees, and I'm looking at his chart on my Astro Matrix app, and I see that it says 29 degrees, but in the transiting planets, and actually in his natal chart, um, his Pluto is in Leo. It
yeah,
says Trump's Pluto is 10 degrees, 2 minutes Leo in the 12th
right.
house. Wow. But then when it says transit planets, there's Pluto, 29 degrees Capricorn. And I'm thinking, wait
Right.
a minute, how can you have a transit planet on your natal chart? You see what I'm saying? Oh,
What's about, no, it's just saying where the transiting planet is relative to the natal chart.
Yes, it makes a yod with Neptune on his ascendant.
yeah, but
Mars.
the natal chart is the snapshot of the planets at the time of birth.
Correct.
So that's where the planet is. Pluto is in uh
Leo at 10 degrees Leo when Trump was
yeah, but
born.
then how
Yes,
is it also transiting at the same time at 29 degrees Capricorn?
because that's where it is now. That's
Oh,
where
it is
Pluto is
now.
now.
I get. Oh, no, understood.
Hello.
Okay, no. Oh, I see. Okay, this is okay. Got it. I got it. Cool.
I know sometimes we confuse ourselves, don't we? Okay. Any other questions? Okie dokie. So there's the map of the eclipse. Right in this area is Hawaii. So they would actually have an opportunity to maybe able to see some of the eclipse, about 50%. Okay. So here's the question. What's your preferred house system? Here's some common ones. Placidus, Cope, Old Sign, Porphyry, Regiomontanus, Campanus, Topocentric, Meridian, Equal. Do you have a different one that you prefer?
I like
Anybody offering here?
I like Coke. I've done everything with Coke.
You
I
like
like
Coke?
Coke too, but I had a love affair with Campanus, which I'm still having from time to time.
Michael, what's your preference?
Well, I have been absorbed into the Sidereal, Lahiri, and the Vedic perspective, and which is whole houses, which is
Well,
I'm just looking through that lens. I cannot say that I prefer any. I was leaning to Placidus,
okay.
but now I'm looking through my Vedic astrology chart is completely different and is
Yes.
house based. So I'm looking through different lenses, and I
Yeah.
don't really have. I'm not judgmental. I don't have any favorites,
Okay.
but
That's good.
well, I would say Placidus, and but I'm looking through the whole house system now.
Yep. There's arguments for everything. There isn't. I don't maintain that there is a right or wrong house system. They all work for different people for different purposes. Um, if you do much study in horary, read books on horary, you'll find a lot of time that the particular author will have a recommended, at least, house system to use. Regiomontanus is quite often suggested or recommended to be used for horary. Um, but it varies depending upon the astrologer. It seems like we tend to prefer whatever house system we learned with, we were first
Right.
exposed to. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that.
How's this for an analogy?
But
Let's say you've got a photographer with the old-fashioned Nikon camera and a whole set of lenses. You got the
yeah,
telephoto, you got the wide angle, and depending on what the shot that the photographer is going to take, he's going to choose his lens, right? So
right.
maybe the house systems are like a lens, because I noticed the difference between Placidus and Coke is that one could offer a better interpretation regarding an event or a person than the other.
Yeah,
So it's
I think that's a good idea.
yeah. So, um, so going along here, uh, anybody else out there want to offer a thought or an opinion?
Well,
Well,
is there I have a question. Do you think that, is there any particular circumstance where you should go from like the one that you regularly use to a one that you use for, I don't know, something special or something like that? I have a tendency to double check on Campanus on things that I think are really important. I don't know, does anyone else use Campanus at all?
no.
Just me. And that's
Wave?
just, you know,
I use Placidus and the whole sign house system.
Ah,
I
good.
use Placidus because it's, for me, I was trained on it, like James had said, and everybody used Placidus back in the day. That was in the 80s. And I think it's really accurate for prediction purposes if I'm wanting to go in that direction. But then if I'm looking at somebody's personality and soul, I will then look at the whole sign house system because it gives another flavor. I'm sure all of them do, but the whole sign house system has something archetypal about it, like the equal one does. So it gives you a, like that.
Okay.
Just like that. That's all.
That's good. Thank you, Wade. Anybody else want to
Say
venture
one
into the?
thing- I could say one thing about being a teacher when I'm working with students and they have to turn in their final project. I tell them I use coke houses, but sometimes they turn in using whole houses or Placidus, and there is a difference.
Yeah.
There is a difference. If so, not a lot, but quite
It's
often
not- yeah.
significant.
It's not
Mhm.
a lot.
For
But
what it's worth, Marion March said she did extensive work and she's convinced that Coke is right.
A lot of people love Coke.
Yeah.
It's probably half and half in the country. It's very, very popular.
Let's in case of anybody who might be listening or watching this video at some point in the future, by Coke we mean KOCH house system, not the other kind of Coke. We're not drinking the cola.
The other thing that's great about equal or whole, but I really like the whole sign, is that the intercepted houses disappear, the intercepted signs rather. And
Mhm.
there's something really nice about that feeling of having everything just be equally laid out. It's just an internal sense of equanimity that I like.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's- Well, coke is the only one I know that has intercepted houses, and quite often they're important.
I
Mhm.
agree.
Placidus has the interceptions.
They may be different ones, but
Right.
yeah. Typically the interceptions will change if you switch from Placidus to Coke, but not always. Whole sign and equal sign are the only two that I'm aware of, I think, that won't give you intercepted signs or houses. Of
Right.
course, now it all depends on where, the location where you're erecting the chart and the time when they're of birth and everything, whether or not you'll end up with interceptions. But the others it's a possibility. Okay, okay, whoops, here we go. Where am I? Okay, here we are. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about houses. So there we go. The houses represent the areas of our life. How systems determine how those areas are divided up, whether they are all the same size or some bigger than others, drawing increased emphasis or attention to certain areas of our lives. One can argue that, well, if you're using a system such as Placidus or Coke, or you don't have equal houses, is the large house one which requires more attention or going to get more attention simply because transits take longer? Or will the narrow houses perhaps get extra emphasis because the transits will be shorter and they may be more intense? In tropical and sidereal astrology, regardless of the house system used, the qualities of the 12 houses are essentially the same. They're numbered 1 to 12 in a counterclockwise direction, beginning with the ascendant as either the cusp of the first house or in the first house. Different house systems generally fall into 3 types. Equal, where the houses are all 30 degrees, a time-based, or a space-based, and that has to do with how they calculate the cusps of the other houses. I'm not going into them because it takes too much time. Time and space-based are similar in that they both will not necessarily have 30-degree houses. One is based on the 24-hour day, and the rising of the signs, where the other is based on space, that is the ecliptic and the meridian circles, using the ascendant and midheaven to divide the chart into quarters, and then use either a time or space method to calculate the cusp of the second, third, fifth, sixth, and corresponding houses. So pretty much all of them, you'll have your ascendant and midheaven are going to be the same, regardless of which house system you're using. And depending upon the house system, you may have typically the ascendant will be the first house cusp and the midheaven the 10th house cusp. Not always. Sometimes the ascendant is the first, but the 10th isn't the 10th house. The midheaven isn't the 10th house cusp. It may actually end up being in the 9th house, because it depends on how that house system cuts up the chart. Okay, equal houses all use 12 houses at 30 degrees each. And they start with the ascendant as the first house cusp, and subsequent houses are at same degree of the next sign. So like my ascendant is 17 degrees, 17 minutes of Sagittarius. And so with an equal house, using equal houses, the cusp of all the other houses would be 17 degrees, 17 minutes of the next sign. In whole sign, houses match up with the signs with 0 degrees of the ascendant sign on the first house cusp. The ascendant is in the first house, not the cusp of the first house.
Yeah, I find
Okay,
it.
so whole signs, houses are match signs exactly. 0 degrees Aries to 30, to 30 Aries. 0 Taurus is the second house. Well, it's not necessarily the second house and first house, but the houses are all 30 degrees and match up exactly with the 30 degrees of signs. The first house will still be the sign on the rising and the ascendant or the rising sign. So it could be Aries, it could be any one of the 12 signs. But the house cusp would show, for example, mine would show as 0 Sagittarius, as my first house cusp, excuse me, with the ascendant showing itself at 17 degrees in the first house. And the midheaven would then be at 11 Libra. And what would be my 10th house? Libra, 12, yeah. No, 7th house. Yeah. Weird. Okay. Something like that. Okay. So at any rate, you got the idea?
Yep.
Okay. Let's look. Okay. Hemispheres. Two ways of looking at a chart that really aren't talked about a whole lot is hemisphere and quadrant emphasis. So you have the top half of the chart, houses 7 to 12, is the southern hemisphere. And the eastern hemisphere is houses houses 9, 10 through 3, 10 to 3. The northern hemisphere is houses 1 to 6, and the western is 4 through 9. And if you have a concentration of planets in one of those hemispheres, then that tells you something about the individual. Usually things are relatively balanced and you don't really get to see too much of an emphasis. Some people like myself have, like, I've got all my planets in the southern hemisphere. So that's what drew me to studying this a little bit more. So there's some ideas. Southern half, emphasis in the top half of the chart indicates a tendency to be more objective, sociable, and concerned with outside events. The eastern hemisphere, or left-hand side of the chart, indicates a tendency to be more self-motivated, self-assertive, initiating and function independently. And if you'll notice, most of Trump's planets are basically on the eastern hemisphere. And so, yeah, he's more self-oriented. The northern hemisphere at the bottom of the chart indicates one who tends to be more private and subjective. It's where it's the development of a personal identity and personality. And then the Western Hemisphere or right side indicates a tendency to be other oriented, more receptive to with other ideas, and works and plays better with others than somebody on the with an Eastern Hemisphere. Eastern Hemisphere people tend to be more self-starters, tend to function better alone, or prefer to be alone or be the it. Western tend to be better at group players. So here's the quadrants. This also shows a breakdown of the houses, angular, succeedent, and cadent. So the fourth quadrant is houses 10 to 12. First quadrant, 1, 2, and 3. Second quadrant, 3, 4, 5, 6. Third quadrant, 7, 8, 9. Fourth, 10, 11, and 12. The angular houses are the ones of, well, I talk about that in a bit, but something that you can do and some do is you can use basically the 12 houses for an aging process. It can be the equivalent of a year of life. So that age 1 is, from birth to 1 is the first house, 1 to 2 is the second house, 2 to 3 is the third house, and so on. But you can also then do multiples of 1. It could be 2 years, it could be 7 years, for example. If you did 7 years per house, you're looking at an 84 years to move all the way around the chart, which is about a little longer than the average lifespan. If you go to 8 years, you're up to 96 years.
Well,
Things
84, isn't it? Circle, I mean, period there. I, so how would Uranus fit into that? Would we be moving through different aspects of Uranus? I mean, that was a joke, but I mean, how would we fit Uranus's concept there?
Well, Uranus basically spends 7 years in a sign, and with 12 houses, it would be spending. You notice this is like using equal houses, kind of, pretty much, and that would spend 7 years in each house. Now, if you're using, say, Placidus or Coke, where you have unequal houses, you could look at it as an indication that maybe that age, the person's age during that period of time may have more stuff happening, more emphasized. It may have taken them longer to develop that aspect of themselves.
What if you're going to do that? One more thing for I don't want to bore you, but if you were to try and do that, would you start with your natal Uranus at the AC?
Um, yeah, the one way to do it would be to take and place your natal Uranus at the ascendant, because then you're going from birth. That's where Uranus was when you were born. And the ascendant represents, where we were when we were, what was going on at the point of birth. And by doing that, then you would move at the rate of, if you moved it at the rate of 7 degrees or 7 years per sign, for example, instead of equating it to the houses, or at the rate of, you know, 30 degrees every 7 years, be a little easier to do it looking at the signs. And then you would see where, okay, this 7 year period is going to be a little more emphasized because the house is larger. That area of life gets extra attention time. Perhaps something significant happened in that person's life around the age of 7 that bore an significant impact on them. Which reminds me of a video I saw a long time ago when it was a training video when I was managing in federal government, and it was title of it was something like "You Are What You Were When." The basic premise being that by age 7, we pretty well have established our personality and what we're going to, we're pretty well set in who we are. Now, traumatic events after that, significant events after that can make changes, but people are pretty well set by the time they're 7 years old. you've developed your personality within the family. Now you're out in school, you're first grade, second grade, and you're functioning with others, unless you were me, where I was the only one in my grade uh, for 8 years. So, but yeah, so you start to, that's why I'm the way I am. So yeah, you start at that point, you're pretty well set. By 14, we're in our teens, and so we go, yes. Cornelia.
Yes. Are you familiar with a book called Chimpanzees Dream Astrology?
I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it now.
It's a fascinating book that he deals with quadrants. For instance,
Hmm.
if you have a lot of planets in the first quadrant, like I do, it's called the lone wolf.
Hmm.
And if you have a lot of planets in the second quadrant, it's called the eternal child, I think. This is, the creative part. When you
Okay.
look at the third quadrant, people really haven't grown up, because if the major planets are up here in this third quadrant, they've only touched them by oppositions. And then the fourth
Mhm.
quadrant is something else. But it's all very interesting. But I have to say one thing, that in my work with children and with Dominique, we've come up with a whole plan, which is going to be new. I consider you're born at the ascendant, but the fourth house is your nest.
Hmm.
And you spend the first 2 years in the nest, where you have to establish trust with the parent and feel safe.
Hmm.
When the first Mars comes, first Mars return happens when you're 2, and the brain shifts then. And so you're now in the first house, fighting for independence. And so you're affected by the houses in the seventh house as reflecting back to you what you are. So this is
Hmm.
where we get the persona that's developed because of people reacting to us and telling us what we are.
Yeah.
But this whole first quadrant goes from year 2 to 12.
Okay.
12, 12, you hit the Jupiter return and return to the fourth house.
Hmm.
12, 12 to 14, and then in the fifth house, you're in your teens, because that's your identity house, and you're comparing it
Yeah.
to your friends,
Hmm.
reflecting from friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the
Yeah,
brain
it's,
finally doesn't complete its expression, and the ego isn't fully developed until between the ages of 22 and 25.
yeah.
So
And
it's
that's around
really a
the,
different kind of a thing.
yeah, it's around 25 or so is when they figure the typical person will have fully de more fully developed their psyche and have a good understanding of right and wrong. Prior to that, right and wrong is a bit more obscure for children and teenagers and young adolescents.
Right.
Um, yeah, using 4 years as 4 years for a house, that works fine. Yeah, because then when you get around, what happens then is, as you're moving into the 11th and 12th houses, you're getting into that
Well,
midlife
I
crisis.
look at them as polarities. For instance,
Hmm.
if you're a student in the fifth house and you're deciding on a career or job, the sixth house has to do with what you've done with it. Are you going to college, or have you dropped out of school altogether? Because the 12th house comes in here,
Hmm.
because you find the kids who are dropouts or have gotten into drugs, or they're more involved in the 12th house. And so they have a more difficult time succeeding. But at least the 12th house offers you redemption.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you can get cured of your drug disease or alcoholism or whatever it is,
Hmm.
and then go back to the other side.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there too, is that whether you're talking houses or signs, you can't forget that the opposite house or sign is also in play at the same time.
Exactly.
as a mirror or reflection or of what's going on in the sign you're in. Yeah,
Right.
thank you. Okay. Angular houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10 are similar to cardinal signs. They're more action oriented, where things start. Birth starts, life starts. The succeeding houses, 2, 5, 8, and 11, are similar to fixed signs. These are more stable, stubborn, less likely to embrace change. It's about creating stability and accumulation. And then you get to the Caden houses, 3, 6, 9, and 12. Similar to mutable signs, these are more flexible, adaptive to the shift from where you're adapting to the shift from being fixed, succeeding, into the angular, let's start something new house again. It's where we learn and change. And so it's a constant flow going around. And so, it's when you start to look at this, you can start to think in terms of, okay, so what happens when you put a cardinal sign in a succeedent house, a fixed house, for example? Let's say you get Pisces in the first and Aries in the second house. Second house is succeeding house, is our finances and value system. Aries there could make somebody a bit loose or free with their property and more apt to take risk with what they have, for example. Or you put a fixed sign in a cadent house where it's about, the sign is about stability, but the house is about making and preparing for changes. Those are some added levels to keep in mind as you look at a chart. Pausing for questions. Okay. Are we ready? Okay. Oh, here's some basic stuff. Okay, so the rulership book by Rex Bills.
Mhm.
This is my good old copy. This is what edition is this?
I use
I
that a
found
lot.
this at a used bookstore. Probably the I forgot, right? Copyright. This is a 1971 copyright. Doesn't look like it's got any additions, so it's a nice old copy. I like the way it's organized.
I do
Here we
too.
go. Here we go. The first house describes you, your physical attributes. There's 2.5 pages of listing things ruled by the first house in Rex Bill's book. It runs from ability to worldly outlook. The way the book is organized is that you have an alphabetical listing of things like ability to worldly outlook, but you also have it broken down by planet, by sign, and by house. So if you're wondering about, well, what falls in and what the third house rule, you go to the third house section. Or if you're wondering, well, who rules uncles, you go to the alphabetical listing and look up uncles. And you'll find that it may depend on whether you're talking about a maternal uncle or a paternal uncle. Are you talking about your wife's sibling, your mother's sibling, or your father's sibling? Second house, money and values, 2.5 pages, goes from ancestors to wealth. And within it, it will not just show, doesn't have just the word, but it also will show, the planet or signs involved and houses involved. Third, communication siblings, 4 pages, all the way from accidents to writing. Fourth house, home, nurturing parent, 3 pages listing from accumulations to wombs. Fifth house, creativity and children, you got 3 more pages, actors to youth. Sixth house, daily routine, health, pets, 3 pages, abdomen to zoology. Seventh house, significant others, marriage, 3 pages, agreements, wife or spouse. Eighth house, death and endings, 3 pages, alimony to wills. Ninth house, talks about beliefs and long distance travel. This is just some very general keyword categories. About 3¼ pages running from advertising to writers. So you find that writers, as opposed to writing, fall in different houses. 10th house, career authority recognition. Only 2½ pages from achievements to vocation. 11th house, friends and groups, 2¼ pages, acquaintances to wishes. 12th house, hidden strengths, weaknesses. Got 4 pages running from afflictions to worries. So that's just to give you an idea. If you're really looking, try to follow stuff and figure out where things fall. I highly recommend getting a copy of Rex Bill's The Rulership book.
Yeah, it's
Now,
good.
there is another book on rulerships called The Book of Rulerships, Keywords from Classical Astrology by Dr. J. Lee Lehman. There we go. Which is also pretty good. I just happen to like Rex Bill's a little better. It does it puts everything, it does alphabetical, it does planetary rulerships as well. Let's see. Sign rulerships and house rulerships, but they're shorter sections. She doesn't list as much as is listed in Rex Bill's book. Okay. The problems we all face, the 12 houses by Dane Rudhyar. All right, so starting with the first house. So that the asterisk indicates that first line underneath where it says Western Tropical Sidereal comes from Dane Rudhyar's The Problems We All Face, the 12 Houses. The others, keywords, stuff that I found in different sources. I think I got most of them listed at the back in references. So in Western Tropical Sidereal Astrology, we look at the first house as being, it's how to become your true self. It's about the personal style nuances, how you dress, move, adorn yourself, the overall condition of your body, first impression you make on others, as keywords such as emergence, surface, appearance, facade, self-personality, initiative, activity. In the Vedic system, it's the physical body, the health, the brain, character and general prosperity of the person, the mindset, thought processes, and personality. Not that different. Second house, how to use what you possess. This is from the Dane Rudhyar reference. Your personal possessions and how you care for them and use them. The qualities you value in yourself and others. How much money you earn. What you are willing to do for money. Your self-esteem, any innate talents that you're born with. Beethoven was born as a gifted composer. It's like a savant. There are just some people that are born with natural talents or proclivities towards things like math or science or literature or such ever. Keywords, response, security, who you love, acquire, respond. From a Vedic standpoint, we're talking about food and eating habits, family values, your savings, personal finances, speech, and primary education. Notice things are shifting a little bit here from a Vedic perspective.
Yep.
Third house, mastering everyday relationships. Kind of like that as a key reference for the third house. It's your neighborhood, the routine tasks you perform without conscious thought. Childhood, grammar school, your relationships with siblings, communication style and short trips, keywords, letters, networking, gossip, emails. The Vedic, it's your courage, siblings, writing skills, passion and desire, ambition, communication skills. Fourth house, stability in your personal life. Your foundation from your childhood, your family and the nurturing parent, how you maintain your nest, whether it's the nest you were born into or the nest that you created when you move out. It's really how it's the point where you stand on the earth, how much privacy you will need, matters of real estate, The emotional memories you operate from subconsciously. Some keywords: experience, security, base of operations. Vedic, it's happiness, comfort, the mother, education, immovable property, peace of mind, hereditary property, treasures. Thought that was interesting.
Jim, could I put something
Yep.
in there?
Yes.
On the fourth house, the way I do it in Kid Wheels, like I know that in astrology, there's always been a conflict between, is this the mother and the 10th house the father?
Hmm.
But I kind of decided that it was a polarity in of parenting. It's the parenting axis. So it
Hmm.
doesn't matter because both parents provide security and all of that. But both parents also set boundaries with their children. So
Yeah.
I've looked at the two houses as the fourth house is a nurturing house, and the 10th house is where the parents set the limits, what their expectations of the child are.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it tells you a lot about the father and mother in different ways.
Yeah.
But it's basically those two processes that are going on in that early time.
Yeah.
Because even if you're born in a different culture, they have different parenting
Yes.
strategies than other
Yeah.
cultures do.
Yeah. I think the idea of mother, fourth house, father, 10th house is an old
Right.
concept based upon when the mother stayed home and raised the family and the father was out supporting the family. Uh,
Well, look at how many times you have a family where the wife is working and the husband is the nurturer.
that that changed. I mean, yeah, that really started changing following for America, I think following the Civil War, actually, because so many men were killed during the war
Right.
or severely disabled. And it became really emphasized with World War II when women had to go to work. I know that once I started grade school, my
The other,
mother started
the other
working.
interesting, the other interesting thing is that during World War II, you had the first signs of juvenile delinquency because the mother was often working while the husband had gone to war.
Uh, yeah, though,
So there was nobody setting the boundaries.
yeah. Hmm.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
here?
Yes.
Uh, I- One of the things that I have found out in my study of the fourth house is that Neptune in the fourth house often cons a kind of a situation where there may be a really terrible thing going on with one of the parents or whatever, but there's kind of an apotheosis to one of these troublesome parents are seen as something kind of like a deity or something, and it takes a long time, even growing up, to realize that your concept of the beatings were good for me. Let's say that. Okay. Stuff like that. And I have found that sometimes you discover that, especially with people who have gone on a little bit and then reflected on their fourth house as they got older. And I wondered if Cornelia or anybody has observed that or even think it makes
Yes,
sense to them.
one of the parts of my book is talked about different kinds of mothers. A Neptune in the fourth house would indicate what we call an almost mother. That this mother may be ill, she may be depressed, she may have alcoholic problems or drug problems. So she understands sometimes, but she can't always answer the cues that the baby gives her. So she's an almost mother. So the child grows up confused and turns out to be one of those rescuers when
Hmm.
he's getting interested in the opposite sex. He becomes more of a rescuer because he's still trying to rescue his mom.
Yeah.
Have you found that children of alcoholics often get involved with another partner who's an alcoholic? I've seen that happen. I don't know, uh, but it's sometimes a woman will latch on to a guy who they seem to think if only he had the love I could give him, he wouldn't be an alcoholic.
Yeah,
We're
right.
just trying to fix someone from their fourth house or
That-
whatever.
That's the rescuer. That's the rescuer.
Yeah, the rescuer.
But quite often the rescuer then reverts to the persecutor. When are you
Ah,
going to stop drinking? Yeah,
yeah,
hmm Yeah, they become the abuser or the enabler
right,
rather than the savior. Yeah, and I
right.
think again the point you make here is about the polarity of the houses, and I like the idea that you think of the 410 as being a parental polarity, where yeah, because there's a lot of single parent homes now, and
Right.
um, whether it's a father or a mother, um, or you
I
have
found that quite often you'll find the ruler of the 10th in the fourth, or the ruler of the fourth in the 10th,
mhm,
which says that it's a different parent.
yeah, because I mean that, but that polarity concept works all the way around the 12 houses. I mean, the first house is about the self, the seventh house is about others. Yeah, the
Right, and
second house is about your wealth,
those
the eighth house is about the wealth that you get from others.
and because they're cardinal houses, you're very much affected by the people in the seventh house reflecting back to you who you are.
Yeah.
If you
hmm
somebody's telling you you're not smart, you're slow, you're ugly, you're whatever, the child takes that in because they have no way of knowing what the truth is. They have to find that out later through therapy.
One of the things I find that's interesting, though, is that um, for a long time, and probably a lot of astrologers still think that way, is that the uh, angular houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10, are ones that are have extra strength and power um, in terms of
Development.
the development of the person. However, the study by Michel Gauguin proved otherwise, finding that the actual power lies not in the angular house, but in basically the last 10 degrees or so of the cadent house, where the
Exactly.
change is made. They found, like when looking at charts of successful military people, athletes, and the like, Mars was much more apt to be in the cadent house, conjunct or close to the cusp of the angular house, rather than actually in the angular house.
Right. Well, my son David has Mars in Capricorn, in his first house, very close
Mhm.
to the ascendant, even though he has a Sagittarius ascendant. But he's definitely an athlete, was since he was little.
Mhm.
can
Yeah,
I
so I
ask
mean,
a
it's
question?
yes.
See, have you a way of, I call it the pecking order, that there's one kid in the family that gets less love, picked on more. Is there something that you can point out, that something you could look for that kind of situation?
Look at birth order.
Yeah, birth order is important. Birth order is definitely important.
Yeah,
What is,
and
what is the, I'm confused then. What birth order?
Well,
Uh,
okay, if you're a firstborn child, you're the only child
yeah,
until the next one comes along.
right.
So you tend to be more responsible and more of a loner. Uh, and then when the second one comes along, if it comes along at the wrong time, if it happens when you're 2.5 and the second kid comes along, I've found they have a big jealousy problem because at 2.5, the child is going through a period of whining and clinging to the mother. And if she has a new baby, of course, she doesn't have that attention to give that child. So they get very upset and get jealous of that baby. Is this? I found that to be very interesting. I found that happens many, many, many times.
Uh-huh. How about,
And the second child is uh, always behind the first one because they learn a lot from the first one, and the first one quite often becomes responsible for the second one.
Mhm.
And the third one and the fourth one. So that's why they're more responsible, and they're more disciplined, and they're more probably resentful for having that position. Oh, take care of your brother, take care of your sister.
Uh,
They don't like that. The baby of the family is the one who's a rebel. The baby in the family is usually spoiled by the mother because it's the last child, but it's rebellious. It doesn't want to follow the pathway of the other three kids. I did an interesting experiment with my class one time of 11th graders. I had them divide themselves in groups as to whether they were first, second, third, or fourth child. And so they had to have a discussion on what they found was most common to them. And it was really, really interesting how the first group and then the fourth group were yelling at each other. I always have to take care of you. I'm sick and tired of it. Yeah, well, you're always bossing me around and telling me what to do. You need to leave me alone. I mean, it was so obvious when I came out.
uh-huh.
It was fascinating.
Yes, I'm
The other thing I want to point out, because I've done a lot of research on this too, is the fact when you're looking at a child's chart, you are looking at the child's perception of the mother, not who the mother actually is, but the child's perception.
Yeah.
It doesn't really describe the real mother. And I saw that in my practice. I had three adults come to me at different times, and they had the same mother, and they all saw her differently.
That can be with the father too, I think.
What?
I can think it also can be with the father.
Yeah, exactly.
so with the mother, are you looking at where are you looking for that? At the position of the moon?
I'm looking at the moon and the aspects to the moon.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
And now you've got many aspects to the moon, and the mother has many faces.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else out there got any comments or questions? Want to add anything to this? Okay, let's see. Moving on to the fifth house. It's the path of self-expression. How you play when it's party time, the charming, creative, delightful side of you, your hobbies, interests, and playmates. It gives you joy, your inner child, but also gambling and speculation. Keywords, expression, pride, teaching, and awareness. On the Vedic side, it's intelligence, hobbies, creativity, love affairs, courtship, past life, good deeds, memory, and execution of plans. Found it interesting that here's something past life, good deeds. So here's the good karma you bring with you. Look to your fifth house.
But we also have to realize this is where the adolescent is comparing himself to the group.
Hmm.
Do I fit in? Am I different? Why am I different?
Yeah, this shows up as like high school years also.
Right.
It also, they left out sports.
Yes, I had a pair of twins once, and one twin was into sports. They both had a fifth house son. One was into golf, and the other one wasn't into art.
And also actual children are often described by the fifth.
Yes.
You can get clues about, you can even get clues if the person's going to be fertile or not from the fifth too.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. So
Well,
yeah, so there's
one of my sons has Saturn in the fifth house. He has one son, but he's also a gambler.
Yeah.
That's how he makes his living.
I once had to do a while ago a reading for a couple. They were newly married, and I knew the woman really wanted to have kids, and they were young in their 30s, and the husband had a configuration in the fifth house that indicated that he would not be able or would not be that interested in having children. Or that if he did have children, they wouldn't be okay so much. And they ended up divorcing because she wanted to have kids and he didn't. But I wanted to just say, there's a couple of things I could say, but I wanted to say how difficult that was for me to be in that position.
Right.
I could not figure out what to say that wouldn't just decimate their marriage. At that time, I just didn't have the communications because I was, young too. So sometimes, you don't have the answers to everything, even though you could see things. He eventually did remarry years later, and they did have a baby, and the baby has Down syndrome.
Ah,
Okay, Mar.
Yes, hi there. Sorry, I meant to ask this question or make this statement earlier. I actually have moon everything. My moon is aspected by everything. And it's not because my mother had different sides to her. I believe it's actually because I had two mothers. I had my biological mother, and I had my grandmother who lived in our house and was a second mother to all of my siblings and I. So I think that there, and then other people might have a death of a mother and then a stepmother or something like that. So I
Right.
don't think it has to necessarily apply to just one mother figure. If you've had other mother figures, I think that it could apply to that as well. I just wanted to put in those three cents. Okay,
You're
thanks.
absolutely
great.
right. And
Thank you.
that's one of the questions you have to ask. Was there somebody else in your life that was acting as a mother?
Okay. Moving along. Excuse me. Yeah. Where am I? Click. Wait. Sixth house. Personal crises and self-improvement. How you like things to go on a day-to-day basis, where you plan and schedule, the nature of your work environment and how you take care of your health, pets, generally smaller ones. Keywords: preserving, caring for, salvaging, and conserving. Vedic: disease, sickness, competition, employees, subordinates, servants, debts, enmity, hygiene, sanitation. So they seem to put more emphasis from probably from a health standpoint, but yeah, there you can see that there are some differences, but not a lot of differences, but there are differences, or may well be differences, in how they interpret the houses, and particularly in reference to the um, ruling planet or lord of the sign house. Now, Vedic does only whole signs. So there's no, so their charts are strictly whole sign, and which is why they don't use round charts in part, I guess. But I have some examples of, so there's two different Vedic systems, a northern India and a southern India system. I have chart examples of both of those for later. Seventh house, greatest test, human relationships. Yeah. How you relate in a one-on-one situation, marriage, significant relationships, partnerships, when you use the word my to describe a relationship. That's a seventh house relationship. Keywords: union, response, responsibility. Vedic: marriage, partnership, legal bondage. House in a foreign country, foreign relationships, contracts, and influence.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Eighth house. Solve the problem of living. How you handle extreme situations. Agony, ecstasy, sex, death, mergers, financial and otherwise. Surgeries, psychotherapy, how one recuperates. Resources from significant seventh house relationships. How they're handled. Keywords: criticism, reduce, analysis, exchange. Vedic: sex, intimacy, longevity, occult, long-term illnesses, inheritance, and legacies.
Hmm.
Ninth house: expand safely and sanely. That's how you handle new experiences, foreign places, long distance travel, legal matters, higher education, forming opinions, the big picture, your ability to create a or understand a big picture of things. Keywords: what lasts, purification, essentials, seed essence. Vedic: it's higher education, father, the guru, and pilgrimage, long distance travels, religious and philosophical beliefs, research and invention.
Wow, they put the father in the ninth house.
Yeah, I was a
Maybe
little bit surprised about that.
yeah, maybe because it's associated with the teacher. The
Mhm.
ninth house is like the teacher and the father and also the guru. So
Yeah.
that would, like the
Well,
teacher.
you have the third house is the opposite, so the father's heirs acting like a teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
Does it mention spirituality or religion in the ninth?
Yeah, religious philosophical beliefs, yes.
Okay, I don't see that mentioned, but fine.
Here, whoops, 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 whoops. Vedic higher education, father, guru, pilgrimage, long distance travels,
Oh, yeah.
religious and
Yeah, that's in
philosophical
the,
beliefs.
but why is that there and not also in the ninth on the western side? Because it's also that on the western side.
Yeah, I just didn't list everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I
Mhm.
have a couple of questions here. First of all, I threw this out there because I don't put any real faith in it. There's a couple of astrologers who say that the ninth house is the second marriage. I don't know if any of you heard that, but I have been
Yeah.
told that by a couple of people who uh, give private readings and are successful. The
Right.
other thing, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I remember early on that, the seventh house is your first marriage, and the second marriage is the ninth house. The third marriage would be the 11th. Fourth marriage would be your first.
That's when you
You'd
marry a
skip out.
friend.
Yeah. And then, marry a friend. I skipped a step.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
I have quite an interest in dream analysis, and I've been working on my own system, and I took a couple of online classes on this, and they seem to think that the ninth house was the beginning of dream analysis. I don't really go with that, but I wondered if you guys went with that.
Hmm.
I'd put that in the eighth, but it could certainly be shared by the ninth, just because of the spiritual ways that we
I
could look
like
at
the eighth
interpreting.
better. I like your
What?
way better.
You like what
Mhm.
better?
I like your way, the eighth.
Ah, okay.
Hmm.
But I'm
Yeah.
trying, usually when people say, just gonna go back for a second, I'm trying to think it out. Usually when you say like what Spence was saying, that the ninth house would be the second marriage, that would be 7 houses from another house, because the seventh house is relationship. You see what I mean? So that
Yeah.
would be, so if it was if it was the ninth house, then it would be
The seventh from the third.
the seventh from the third.
Right.
But I don't know, I don't know how to put that together.
Mhm.
Maybe
Well,
communications.
yeah. And I had also heard that, when you're talking about children, okay, so the fifth house would be the first child, seventh
Oh,
house is the second, ninth is the third, and so on, doing that same process. Um,
true. Interesting. Forgot
mhm.
about that too. The ninth house, according to Tad Mann, are you familiar with lifetime astrology?
Yes, I am.
The ninth house cusp is incarnation.
Yes.
And he developed an interesting system where you can see, based on where the moon is from the ninth house, and the sun, which parent wanted that child? In other words, there's a bunch of stuff that he correlated to the ninth house cusp regarding your incarnation. And then the actual gestation is the upper half of the chart, and then the birth, and then the early childhood, adolescence, and so forth. It actually holds water. I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah,
Of course,
when
I've never seen a system that didn't hold water, to be honest with you. If someone's researched it enough and developed it enough, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Mhm.
I got a quick question on this 9th house cusp.
Yeah, Mike.
What would be the difference if your moon in Cancer is right on the 9th house cusp versus your point of vertex? Is that what it is? VX, point of vertex, which is actually, it's within 3 degrees in the 8th house, approaching the 9th house cusp. Could you see any difference between those?
Um,
Am I making sense?
yeah. What does the vertex have to do with what we were talking about?
I don't know, the 9th house cusp is when the 8th house becomes
Yes.
the 9th house, right?
Okay, right. But we're talking about the
Yes.
ninth house cusp as a indicator for
Well, she
reincarnation.
was mentioning about
The mother would have instigated that that the incarnation of that child.
oh, very interesting. Based on the Cancer moon being right
Just
smack
the moon. No, it doesn't have to be Cancer. It just has to be the moon.
the moon.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
because the moon's
That okay, cool. That's my tropical.
yeah.
Whereas in the Vedic, I have the point of vertex like close to the 9th house cusp.
What do you understand the vertex to be?
I couldn't tell you right now. I'm sorry. I'm fascinated by
Okay.
different points and asteroids, but I've got
Yeah, they are interesting. Yeah. Vertex is a vertex and anti-vertex. It's kind of like another axis point. Um, and it tends to indicate a more fated, almost karmic point,
ah
in part. I mean, it's more than that, but that's the short version of it. So the fact that the moon is there and the vertex is close to the moon, then certainly would reinforce the idea that it was something the mother wanted more so maybe than the father, depending upon where the sun is.
cool. That makes a lot of sense. Cool.
So yes, you were a wanted child.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah.
let me say just one thing about Thomas Mann, A.T. Mann.
Mhm.
His book is called The Divine Plot. And if you haven't seen it, I think you should look around for it as a used book or something, because it's very interesting and gives a lot of different ways of looking at things. And he also has a tarot deck that he made based on astrology. But I think the Divine Plot is something that people should take a
The
good
divine plot,
The Divine
Yeah.
Plot,
Yeah.
PLOT, right?
right?
He's actually written 25 books.
Really?
Yeah. The first book that shot him to fame was in the 70s called Lifetime Astrology, and it's an oversized book, also an old one. You could find it for less, with spectacular drawings that he did himself.
Mhm. I got 2 of his books. 3 if you count the Mandala Astrological Tarot. Lifetime Astrology and the Astrology of Time and Space, Round Arc.
Those are the ones I have. I also know him very well. We met up quite a lot in we lived we met up a lot.
Okay.
We just kept meeting.
What's his name?
Tad?
Spell it.
Tad.
T A.
That's what he goes by. That's how you call him if you were to refer to him personally. But astrologically, professionally rather, it's A.T. MANN.
Yeah. A.T. Mann.
Yeah.
M-A-N-N.
His
Yeah.
writing is not
Thank you.
easy to read. It's very obtuse. unfortunately. But I think in the Divine Plotting, it's a little bit easier. The Lifetime Astrology is a real work of art.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how some people, the way some people write. Dane
Yeah,
Redger can be one that is also a challenge to understand sometimes because of,
absolutely. Yeah, he's kind
yeah.
of like following in that mindset in a way.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
really
but
obscure
if you
kind
can
of.
get if you can get through it, you can get a lot from them, but you have to focus, you have to pay attention.
It was one of the first books that I bought when I was beginning. And I just traveled with it for 4 years because I found it fascinating that you
Hmm.
could do the astrology from the moment of conception rather than from the moment of birth. The moment of conception is the ninth
Yep.
house cusp. The moment of birth is the ascendant. So he added a whole nother thing into the study, which is very interesting. It
Yeah.
works if you use it. Mhm.
Hmm. Interesting. I forgot about that. Yes. Great. Oh, thank you. Yeah, in fact, the first book of his that I bought was one that came with the his mandala of astrology tarot deck, and I bought it because of the deck.
Oh, that's
Oh,
cool.
that's fascinating. But yeah,
Yeah, I have
back
one.
when the back in the days when the Bodhi tree was still in existence, and they had a used bookshop that was just treasure trove of old astrology books. Oh, by the time they went out of business, I think I had pretty much bought at least one copy of everything they had.
Sorry, which was the name
Used
of the
bookshop.
bookstore? I didn't hear you. Which bookstore?
Oh, it was the Bodhi tree.
Oh, the Bodhi Tree, yeah.
The
I
Uh,
was just thinking because you guys are West Coast astrologers and I grew up in the East Coast. I was
yeah.
just wondering if maybe there was a division of the house signs, house systems based on East or West. Because when I was going through the NCGR classes and all this, it was really mostly Placidus. I was just wondering if there was a chance that you were getting other house systems on the West Coast.
Um, I, from my perspective, I think is that if you go online to the different websites where you can do free charts, they almost as in total use Placidus houses.
Yes.
Um, and I grew up, I learned using Koch houses because that was what both my teachers used. And I think Koch's a newer house system, and so that may be why it may have more of a tendency or prevalency on the West Coast.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But it's not as popular in Europe.
No.
I have a chart that shows the popularity of house systems. I think
Oh,
Europe,
interesting.
yeah, it's an old chart, but it's probably still somewhat valid because it shows that the most popular is Placidus, and then topocentric is actually next because it apparently is more popular in Europe. Where are we? Ninth house. Oh, 10th house. There we go. What can you contribute to society? What the public knows about you, career, reputation, social status. It may take time to learn and become accomplished. How you behave when you're in charge. Keywords, vision, out of body, which I found interesting, clairvoyance, realization, practical insight. So those are some interesting keywords that I came across. From the Vedic, it's name, fame, success, status, power, prestige, respect, reputation, and ambition. They're all pretty much very similar. So that's, yeah.
It was such a travesty when the Bodhi tree went out of business because I used to
Yeah.
travel to California often and I would always go there. You always, astrologers always frequent all the New Age help, bookstores. And that was one of the best of those kind in the
Mhm.
world, actually.
Oh,
It
yes.
was.
Mhm.
And then there was what was it, Earth Cafe or something like that? That was like a block or two from it. So it was always great to go
Oh,
to the
how nice.
Bodhi Tree shop and then had to stop at the Earth Cafe for some
How
coffee and
nice.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good old days.
Yes, that was the good old days. Yeah. Oh, that was 10th house. 11th house. After success, what? Your team player, the organizations you may be drawn to, kindred spirits. how you act in group situations, the causes that attract you. Keywords: altruism, what should be, community, co-workers. In Vedic, gains, social network, circles of friends, community, and supporters. As the sixth house from the sixth, it's also the end of the disease. And last but not least, my favorite, the 12th. Bringing things to an end. The side of you that only comes out when you are alone. Your secrets, affairs, and dealings, hospital stays, your traits and behaviors learned early to avoid, stifle, or deny. Where your fantasy, illusions, and pretend lives. Where your fantasy, illusions, and pretend play lives. Keywords: acceptance, prisons, self-sacrifice, patience. On the Vedic side, losses, limitation, waste, and extravagances, separation from family, the house away from the birthplace. Fears, solitude, secrets, greatest self-sacrifice, conspiracy, and exile.
It's also service and large institutions.
Yes. Yeah, it's the institutions, it's the people that live in the institution, such as prisoners in a prison, but also the people that run the prison
And
or
also
the hospital.
doctors and nurses
Yeah.
and all of them go in there. A lot of
Mhm.
Technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
There's a
think
lot
it's
of stuff in the 12th house, which is why Rex Bill's book, it takes up 4 pages.
The Vedic side is all negative, every single thing, except for the house away from the birthplace. It just seems
Well,
there needs to be some, shadow and some conscious stuff going on, That's
yeah,
my progressive point of view.
I think
East
the Vedic system tends to be a bit more
negative,
determinative. It's more determinative as
fatalistic.
opposed to um, the optional.
Yes.
We from the Western tropical standpoint, we try to look at things from a more positive standpoint, as from a more philosophical. The Vedic system tends to be more determinative. It's like, they use what we would call the ninth harmonic chart for marriages, in terms of arranging marriages, and they'll arrange a marriage for, children, little children, and say, okay, here you go. These two pair up real nice. When they reach appropriate age, they can get married, and it's arranged between the families, and that's a done deal.
I'd like
Very-
to add, I would like to add one thing. I think it's also the house of redemption. Because if you look at hospitals and you have a mental problem and you're in a mental hospital, or you're in a recuperation place for drugs or alcohol,
Hmm.
it's a place where you have an opportunity to change your life.
Okay, yeah. Which just made me think of something, and I posed the question to the group since I don't have a definite answer. Uh, so my wife and I are both paranormal investigators, and we watched a very interesting 2-part episode of an investigation at the Allegheny Insane Asylum, which is a massive hospital in West Virginia that was started shortly before the Civil War. Construction was then paused, and then it was picked up, and the first patients were admitted 1864, and they kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. It finally shut down in, I think, 1994, somewhere around there. At any rate, it would appear to be haunted. So my question then becomes, okay, so spirits, would you look to the 12th house or the 8th house? Find ghosts, spirits, demons.
I think it's both because they
Excellent
both
question.
take up esoteric. They both cover esoterica. So I would say both.
Oh. let's see, DE
But you know, there's something else that we need to talk about just for a second. Not, we don't need
Mhm.
to. Just about the 12th house. It's a curious house, you know, because most births occur around daybreak, like dawn.
Mhm.
And that's occurring inside the 12th house as well as the first house. Like it's a part of the 12th house. And so that aspect of a person's personality is obscured. I would call the 12th house in astrology an obscuration of the reality. Because, you know, there's many people with sons, for example, because they were born at that time in the morning, whose sons are in the 12th house and they're prominent in the world. They're, you know, they could be business people, they could be they could be very
Mhm.
successful in their life. And there's nothing about the 12th house traditional description that describes a person's abilities when they do have that sun there. So I just thought I would bring that up.
Well, let's take a look at it. Yeah, you know, it is interesting. And as you mentioned that, I was just thinking, it's like Vladimir Putin's son, I believe, is in the 12th house. George Bush, the younger, his son is a 12th house. He has a 12th house son.
Great
Uh,
example.
and let's see. So let's see. It's it's your traits and behaviors learned early to avoid, stifle, or deny. So you're stifling those things that might come across as negative or turn people off or away from you. But it's also where your fantasy, illusions, and pretend play lives. So it's like where your imagination is at. And if you want to become president, that's where it's germinating, and you're balancing that with the um, learned behavior of what to avoid in order to achieve that goal.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Because that
Thank
could
you.
very well be that they project their fantasy over and over again till it becomes their reality.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
That's what you're
surprised.
saying, right?
I'm surprised Trump's son isn't in his 12th house.
Exactly. But he got the
Okay.
Regulus there. They can't help but think, the two of them, remember, they can't help but think of themselves as kings.
Yeah. Yes, the ascendant on Regulus. Yes. Okay.
I want to say one more thing about this question. When I was in a state of really studying it, which was quite a while ago, I came across an astrologer called Tracy Marks. And
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Tracy Marks, in this book, she goes through and tells you all the people that have had the 12th house aspects, and what, you know, how it really is not really a total expectation that it has to be something like that, because there are a lot of people that she points out that had the 12th house and it somehow had some deeper effect on them. I don't know exactly. You know, it's a long list because it's on the 12th house. So I would just say that because you have something in the 12th house, according to her, you can still have great success. But behind everybody that's a great success, there's a whole lot of psychology. That's all I'm going to say.
That makes
well,
sense.
I think you're right, Spencer. I think that people who have their sun in the 12th house can be connected to somebody. How can I put it? Before they're born, there's
Hmm.
an impression. Uh, but then that sun comes out of the 12th into the first, and then it's a whole new ball game. But you still carry that unconscious impression.
Hmm. One thing that's always puzzled me is that uh, we can, you know, the 12th house is the house just above the horizon, and you know, it's where we hide things, but it's the first house illuminated by the morning sun.
Right.
And the first house is always in the dark.
It's right.
That's true.
So they think that nunneries and people are, or monasteries are people who are looking for the light.
Hmm. Which kind of leads me to the, I wonder if our houses are numbered wrong. If we should start with, if the first house should be the 12th and the 12th should be the first.
Then we'd have to go the other way.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, yeah, no, never mind. Okay,
I've got
it's
an interesting point
food
on,
for another thought. It's the reverse. Every once in a while, I come across something and I'll see a picture of the zodiac and it's reversed. The signs
Yeah.
are going
I've
clockwise
seen
instead
it,
of
yeah.
counterclockwise,
Uh-huh.
and I find it frustratingly annoying. And I wonder why would they do that? And it's it's like I
I saw somebody do a presentation once where they said, uh, your soul is developing from the 12th house. It's going the opposite direction.
I don't know. But
So that's
what were-
the soul's journey is in the opposite direction.
That could be related to the nodal axis.
Right.
In Vedic astrology, you've got Rahu Ketu, and they form your nodal axis. And this
Right.
axis goes retrograde. I was just reading it. I might as well share that. I'm just reading this book that I just ordered off of Amazon, The Lunar Nodes,
yeah.
by this
Right.
Kamala Sutton. Matter of fact, I
Mhm.
ordered 3 books from her only to find out later that it's from the same author. But the nodal axis is going retrograde.
Right.
And it's really deep. The Rahu Ketu or North Node, South Node, it has to do with the past life manifesting in the current life and going forward.
Hmm. Yeah, the lunar nodes are by whether you look at them true or mean, their basic direction is retrograde. It's always backwards.
Now, do you know the Vedic mythology behind the
Yes.
node or Rahu Ketu?
Yes, the
It
serpent.
was a serpent that wrapped its tail around this mountain, and there was a battle between the demigods and the Asuras or demons to get the elixir, the eternal elixir. And then the snake tricked the demigods by drinking the nectar when they weren't looking or something. And so they cut him in half.
Yes,
So you got the head and then you got the tail. The
right.
tail is the bad stuff you want to get away from, and the head is going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of how tropical astrology looks at that. The Vedic astrology puts a lot more emphasis on the lunar nodes, and they consider them basically the equivalent of planets. So they have the 7 visible planets plus the north and south nodes. So
Right, they're
they work
treating
with
them as
10
planets, even
or
though
9.
they're mathematical points.
Yeah. Um, in the tropical side, they are often referred to as the dragon's head and the dragon's tail.
Right.
The head being the north node where we consume new things, and the south node being the tail where the old stuff is, and we get rid of old stuff. It's the things we bring with us into this incarnation, as opposed to where we're going in the north node. So, I mean, we don't look at them as being so much positive and negative as the Vedic system does.
By the way, I wanted to share, the Black Lilith. I've just noticed that
You mean Black
Lilith,
Moon?
the crescent black moon on top of a cross.
Yeah.
Is that Black Lilith?
It's the Black Moon, yes.
I've got that in my 5th house in my Vedic astrology chart. I've got that in my 4th house in my tropical astrology chart. When I read the descriptions of both, it just totally resonates the Vedic astrology chart, and this cannot be the 4th chart, which is just that I prefer that lens currently, looking through the Vedic astrology lens at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's one way of kind of getting a sense of which house system or chart you prefer, is which one do you feel best reflects who you are.
Right. I mean, it's like in my Vedic astrology chart, I have got in my first house, I've got my ascendant, my North Node, and my Neptune and my Venus. Whereas in my tropical chart, I've got nothing. I've got only Saturn in my first house, and all those planets are in my 12th house.
Are
So,
you an artist?
well, not professionally, but I do a whole lot of creative stuff. I do creative travel videos, and yeah, I've got creativity hobbies. But so
Okay.
these are like completely different lenses, and really liking the Vedic. Having four planets in my first house is like really kind of like comforting. It's like, whoa, because the first house is super important. That's like yourself, right? It's better than just having Saturn in the first house.
It could be. But if you're that artistic and doing a lot of creativity, then I would go with the first house with Venus and Neptune there.
Uh-huh.
That's just my 2 cents. I'd have to look at everything else, but that makes sense.
No, I'm liking it. And by the way, Uranus has just gone retrograde, right? I think on the 1st or the 2nd of the month. And the theme is finding our authentic selves. I've been hearing that over and over again, our authentic selves. And so that, yeah, this seems to be I seem to be finding my more authentic self looking at my Vedic astrology chart.
But
But
the
anyway,
Vedic chart is going to be sent. The difference between the Vedic chart and a whole sign chart is that the Vedic chart precesses the equinox. But if you did a whole sign chart, you'd still have all those, the Neptune and Venus, North Node would all appear in what would appear to be in your first house, because it doesn't make the distinction. It doesn't create the ascendant as the first house cusp. It just places it in the sign on the first house.
right.
That's one of the things about the whole sign system that I'm not totally comfortable with, because of the moving things from the 12th into the first, or appearing to move things from the 12th into the first. It's like, are they really in the first or are they in the 12th? Because they're, by degree, they rise before the ascendant.
Yeah, but
So,
this
yeah,
goes back to the difference between the sign versus the constellation. And I'm
no, it
more
has
toward
nothing to do with constellations.
huh?
It has nothing to do with constellations.
Well, I mean, like, Pisces is like, usually the fish, the constellation Pisces in the zodiac. Astronomy divided so you got the zodiac, right? The 12 signs connected to the constellations. But now the
No,
signs have gotten out of synchronization from
Michael,
constellations by
stop.
a sign.
Michael, the constellations and signs were never really connected. The signs were named after the constellations, but they were not connected, because signs are 30 degrees and
I mean, well,
constellations aren't.
correlated. So you're
No,
saying that
they don't even really correlate. If you try to correlate them, then you start to get off in a whole different world that isn't really accurate, because
no,
you
but
have
it
to look
sounds like
that if you're going to
you're
use the constellations, you need to look at the size of the constellation, and you're still a Virgo. Even in Vedic, you would still be a Virgo, because that's how big Virgo is the largest constellation.
Diane.
then that's why you in the Vedics you get into the nakshatras, right? Where it's the circle is divided into 27 segments.
Yeah,
Those are constellations, I think star constellations.
no. Now, the 13 degrees and 20 minutes of arc based on fixed stars, without regard to constellations. And they're
No,
actually related to the 27 brides of the moon god.
no, but
That's
are
how he
not
came up.
12 zodiac signs directly correlated to the 12 constellations?
No,
Okay, well then it can be, then it's not it's kind of complicated, because one can be in Aries when his sun technically was in the sign of Pisces, right?
no. Well, Okay, if you're looking at it from a Vedic perspective or sidereal perspective by precessing the equinox, yes. Somebody
Yes.
born in with an Aries tropical sun could have a Pisces Vedic or sidereal sun, yes.
But then the
But that's
sidereal
based on,
is the
but that is
actual
based, Michael, that's
astronomical
based
position.
on 12 30-degree signs. It's based on signs, not constellations.
Okay. I'm not trying to argue anything, but
I know, but I mean, if you look at the constellations, and I can actually, I mean, I have in the solar fire, there is a wheel design that actually puts the constellations on the outside.
I'm
So you
like a
can actually see
student, and
the
I'm
connection of
still
the,
learning
I
this
sent you
stuff, but
one.
I got to dig deeper
You
in
can
it.
see the connection between the signs and the constellations.
Solar
And you'll
fire.
see that Virgo is, I think Virgo is like 43 degrees. It's the largest constellation of the 12.
Oh, right. But then the sign is 30 degrees.
Yes.
No, yeah.
All 12 signs are 30 degrees.
No, I got you.
And they're based on that, you know, they got their names from the constellations, but that's the only connection that exists because they weren't created as constellation. They weren't even when the Greeks created this current system, tropical astrology with 12 signs and 12 houses, they divided everything into 30-degree segments.
Oh, okay. This question would probably sum it all up. You heard of the first point of Aries? That
Yeah, the
phrase?
Aries point. Yeah,
That's the vernal equinox, right? The first day of spring, which is,
right.
the seasons.
Sure, Aries. Yes.
Okay, now I think I read somewhere, well, that first point in Aries, when you look at the ecliptic, it's in the constellation Pisces.
Yes. By precessing if you precess the equinox, yes.
Okay. Okay, we're all right. I think.
Yeah. If you don't precess, it's not.
No, I mean, but I mean, like if you're an astronomer looking through a
If you're
telescope,
looking,
you would
yeah.
well, you can't see the sun because right, the sun is during the daytime, but that constellation behind the sun would be Pisces. So the first day of spring is happening under the
If
sign of
you're,
Pisces.
well,
That's the whole precession of the actual precession
uh,
concept. I mean, reality.
yeah, that's kind of what happens. Yes. It goes backwards because of the Earth wobble. Yes. But astronomers don't worry about signs and constellations.
Right.
They use right ascension,
Oh,
which
right.
starts from the tropical vernal point of 0 Aries.
Okay. Duly noted.
Okay, here we go. All right, so here's a breakdown of, and I say it's an old chart. It looks like probably from 2011, but still, um, the most common house system then probably still is Placidus, mainly because it's the one that by default is almost all of the online programs use. Some of them, like astro.com, is good. It allows you to change. All of these, I think, are pretty much available through Astro. Coke then becomes the third most common now, and then you got all these others.
I don't even know if I've heard of topocentric before.
Yeah, I mean it's a given one, but yeah, it's not one that you see used much. But apparently, it's used more frequently in Europe.
Okay,
Okay,
so that's there.
all right. So what I've done is I've taken our two contenders, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and I've done their charts just for comparison here. So here's Kamala's Coke chart and Kamala's Placidus chart. And you can see how things shift a little bit between the two systems. Notice that their ascendant and midheavens don't change. It's the cusp that change.
I'm not
And
seeing
see
it.
where if you do Kamala's chart in Coke, her Jupiter's in her 11th house. If you do it in Placidus, it's well ensconced in her 12th house. Neptune moves from 4th to 5th. Stop that. I'm sorry, 5th to 6th. Neptune moves from 5th to 6th. Everything else pretty much
Everything is pretty
stays where
much
it
the
is.
same.
Yeah. So what I then did also
What-
Here's equal houses and whole signs. Okay,
Mm.
so now equal houses works from her ascendant, which is 24 Gemini 26. And all the subsequent houses, their cusps are 24, 26 of the next sign. So you've got 30-degree houses and 30-degree signs, but the signs and houses aren't linked. Where if you go over to the whole sign, her Gemini ascendant, the whole sign creates 0 Gemini, is what we would consider to be the first house cusp, and then puts the ascendant in the first house. And then everything else is at 0 degrees. But the thing about whole signs that bothers me a little bit is the fact that it can create the illusion as if houses and signs are the same thing, and they're not. And nobody will ever convince me they are.
Mm,
Um,
There's affinities, but they're not the same.
yes, they have an affinity, but they're not the same. Yes. That's why I don't like cookbook astrology books that say like things like, oh, Mars in the first house or Aries. Well, if your first house is Virgo, Mars is going to be a whole lot different than it is if it's Aries. And it's not going to be as if, Mars in the first or Mars in Virgo or the sixth house. It's like, no, it's not going to be the same in the sixth house as if it were in the first house.
So
Jim,
here,
would you say that the Neptune in the fifth house indicates she has 2 stepchildren?
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay.
Mhm. As opposed to having natural children. Yeah.
this is
But you can
interesting.
see how things move quite a lot when you go from equal houses to whole signs.
They
Right.
do. Which do you like better for her? That Uranus, Pluto, Venus in the fourth or the third? Well, it's pretty much it's close to almost conjuncting the fourth, but it's still
Yeah. You're right. Her fourth house cusp is 24 Virgo in an equal house.
Mm.
Notice how up in the 10th house, then we see that her midheaven is in the 9th house at 2 Pisces. So this is where you see equal houses based on the ascendant. I think you can also do equal houses based on the midheaven if you want to, but then that moves the uh, ascendant most likely into the first house. But yeah, here you see that there's a big difference where with when you go to whole signs, Mars moves from second to third, and that stellium in Virgo third moves into the fourth house.
Yeah, it's the stellium. Well, the Mars is close enough to the cusp on the third, so it's in the equal. So it's still different, but it would be read as a third house. But the Uranus, Pluto, Venus in the third versus the fourth. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
She had the Saturn in last time we met. She had the Saturn at the 10th house cusp, I remember. So that stayed the same with the whole sign, and that was that Coke or Placidus that you were using.
Yeah,
Probably.
both.
Okay.
It didn't change because the MC didn't change, so that didn't change. In the between Coke and Placidus, they have the same ascendant midheaven sign degrees.
Oh, yeah, but and then it's repeated here in the whole sign.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. I've never been able to find words to say what it means to have the midheaven in another house other than the midheaven to me stays the midheaven wherever it is.
Yeah.
But the fourth house would, I mean, to become president of the country and have those planets there in the fourth house, that there's a correlation to that. The fourth house would be the country. she'd be
Mhm.
taking care of the home, the whole country.
Mhm.
So there's,
Yeah, and she was born shortly before the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions, which would almost, one might even try to say it was kind of her fate or destiny.
but that would,
Plus,
with the Aquarius Saturn and the Uranus Pluto, Uranus Venus, this is she's actually way more progressive than she's acting
mhm.
or speaking.
I would also
She,
point out that she has a Star of David, and
oh yeah,
hmm,
6-pointed.
yeah,
Look at that.
um, an
See,
air,
look at-
a grand air trine between Saturn, her ascendant North Node, and her Sun, and also a fire trine with Mars, Moon, and South Node. But yeah, that gives her that fiery speech, the ability to function as a prosecutor, as an attorney. Uh, the thing that a lot of we tend not to think about is the fact that even prosecutors, uh, most of their time as an attorney isn't spent in court prosecuting cases. They're really doing other things. They're in part they're wheeling and dealing and reviewing the laws and such. So, yeah,
investigating the truth
yeah.
to find out what's going on.
Mhm. Okay,
Yeah.
and I got another one for you
What do
here.
you mean? Wait. Sorry.
Sorry,
Just
sorry. Okay.
sorry, James. Can you talk just a little bit about her node on the ascendant? I just how does that flow through you, knowing her as you do?
How does that flow for me? Well, uh,
Interpretive wise.
now, she tends to have I think where she may not admit it, has a more fated outlook in life than
Ah,
more
I-
destiny oriented than uh, fortune.
I would like to mention one thing about that North Node. Uh, her North Node is conjunct Trump Sun. And,
Yeah.
Biden's North Node is conjunct Trump's ascendant.
Mhm.
So I think
Yeah.
the three of them have had some kind of contact before that they're working out now.
Oh yeah, she was born shortly before his nodal return. Oh yeah, she was born shortly before his nodal return. Hmm.
there was just some wobbling over the
Yeah.
I don't know what just happened.
Anybody? Yeah. Okay. Anybody got any other comments, questions here? Okay, let's take a look. All right. So now here's a comparison of the Kamala's sidereal charts. We see the Fagan Allen on your left and the Lahiri on the right, both using Placidus houses. That's one of the big difference between sidereal and Vedic is that sidereal uses round charts and you can still have different house systems, which you don't have in Vedic, true Vedic. But notice there's actually a difference of 53 minutes of arc between the two. And that's because of a difference in how they calculate precession of the equinox. So
You didn't
yeah,
explain what the, what did you call it? David's,
oh, the Fagan Allen, you mean, or
right, no,
yeah,
no, that she has a star
oh, the Star
now.
of David. Oh, the Star of David. Well, that
Yeah, the Star of David, yes.
okay. Okay, yes. And and the kite. Um, um, Star of David in part creates a lot of connections. It uh, can tends perhaps to give somebody a more, also be more of a optimistic, fated
Positive.
aspect or outlook on life. Um, a sense of a greater, it gives them, it can give them more self-confidence
Right,
because of the strength of it. Um, where one grand trine might devolve into the curse of the grand trine, where you sit around waiting for something to happen.
Mhm.
The two together overlapping like this will tend to offset that, and so you're more apt to be able to draw on the actual gifts of the grand trines.
right.
Now, doesn't Kamala Harris have a Pluto conjunct Uranus conjunct Venus in the fourth
Yeah.
house of Virgo?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what was the significance of that, do you think, in her run for president? How
Well,
does that?
um,
I think
Yeah.
it affects her early childhood.
mhm,
When I saw that, I've just figured, both of her parents were powerhouses, powerhouse intellects, really super intelligent people. And they would have
Yeah, they were activists too.
an activist too.
mhm,
So she absorbed that, that's what she was exposed to,
mhm.
but in a big way. And maybe she took that, and now she's able to take the power of what she was presented with and use it, and act it to become in power herself.
Yeah.
That's a really good example of how that can happen, rather than say, oh, your fourth house was, your home life was a mess as a child because Pluto or Uranus were disrupting it, which it was when her father left. I think she said she was 5 or something, or
Mhm.
she was a child, and that would have been devastating to her, I would
Right.
imagine.
But that was after the Pluto-Uranus conjunctions.
Um,
But yeah, I mean, it would still be, yeah, it would be devastating. It's devastating when a young child has to go through the divorce or separation or loss of a parent. There's no two ways about it. It's never easy. But yeah, it shows that, both of her parents, well educated, um, dynamic, outgoing individuals that have established good reputations in their own right. Um, they gave her helped to impart to her that sense of you're not limited, because they're both immigrants to the United States.
True,
Right.
true. Yeah.
Hmm.
So they would have had they would, because of that kind of intelligence, they would have a natural self-confidence also. So
Hmm.
it
Yep.
would be imparted this way, and having it in Leo makes it even more of her being a leader, uh,
Hmm.
with a lot of self-confidence, that she could actually step into the role of being the president and know that she could do it. That would require enormous amounts of self-knowledge about the self and self-confidence, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You can't
And
And
you can't
I think
pretend your
that
way in that
the
position.
the moon trine the Mars is indicative of what they've been saying about these are happy warriors.
Oh
mhm,
yeah.
That's what they've been
yeah,
calling them in the campaign.
right.
So
And notice that she was born just shortly before the actual full moon. That the sun and the moon, that she has a kite with the moon at the top of the kite and the sun Mercury conjunction at the tail of the kite or bottom of the kite, formed
Right.
with Saturn and her north node ascendant. I'm watching. I do have, it's 2:30. All right, here we go. So here's a these are her Vedic charts. Um, the one in the upper left, which has got the diamonds and half diamonds, that's the what a North India Vedic chart looks like. And the one in the lower right, which is a rectangle with rectangles and her data in the middle, is a South India chart. Now, the South India chart always begins with Aries here. So, and the signs don't change. So
What do you mean the signs don't
her
change?
ascendant is over here in Gemini. Here is where you find the ascendant, and it's typically in this kind of style chart will be represented with a hash line, and you can see the other planets as they go around. So this is always Aries. The North India chart is a little different. We have Aries over here. I think they'll have the ascendant placed here in the chart.
Am I the only person who's not seeing the charts?
Just move your screen a little. I mean, move your thingamajig.
Everybody else sees the charts, right? But Michael?
Yeah.
Check your view or something, Michael. Maybe you did something because
Yeah, just fool around with a couple of, just go backwards and then come back again.
Okay, I got that.
you got it, Michael?
No, I'm afraid, what do you mean, leave and then come back?
No. What are you seeing, Michael?
I'm just seeing pictures of all of you and but no charts. For the
Oh,
panel.
okay. Do an Alt tab.
Alt tab?
Yeah, try Alt tab.
Okay, figure out where the alts.
Do you have a real computer or an Apple?
I'm on a laptop.
Is it a okay? Well, is it a real laptop or an Apple?
Apple.
Okay. It may be something different. Okay, if when you're
Toggle on anything, just toggle on anything and then go back and then return.
try what you can do is there should be something along the upper part of the image of everybody where you can click and shrink it down to size. Yes, no?
Oh, there we go. I just clicked
Got it?
on screen.
Oh, goody. I just lost everybody, but that's okay. Now I can see my whole screen. Okay. So here's a comparison of her charts with the two different India Vedic systems. Okay. And I just did that for reference.
It's interesting.
Mhm.
I didn't, they put the sun, Mercury, Neptune all real close together like that.
Yeah.
In the other charts, they're not all like that. So
Yeah, that's because they're doing it's the way they display it. So you'd have to really look at the degree to see how much of separation we're talking about. Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't think because they don't make those kind of distinctions in Vedic astrology. All right.
I didn't know that because I like that when it's more I don't know how to say it, more general, more, I don't know. I like that they do that.
all right, where you've got the three of them in the same altogether like that, just listed.
Yeah, because it gives it more power, more description. It's more descriptive when they're all together so close.
But the reality is they're not.
But if they're would a Vedic astrologers say the reality is they're not also, or is
In their reality, well, yes, in their reality, they would have them together. Of course, now keep in mind Vedic astrology, true Vedic astrology does not use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto or Chiron.
Right.
oh,
So you'd have to take them out of the chart,
oh.
which would then
Oh.
leave just Venus over here with
But they're
Uranus and Pluto
so
and
it's
Sun, Mercury, and you wouldn't see Neptune there at all.
it's like medieval planets then, Sun to
Yeah.
Saturn, that's it?
Yes, they theirs is more Hellenistic in that sense.
Gotcha. Very interesting.
Okay.
But the house systems, are there house, is there a house? I can't see it that well.
They don't have a house system. Their house system is whole sign. So
Uh-huh.
signs and houses are the same in that
Ah.
sense. So over here in the lower right hand, the one with the squares. Okay, so this is the first house because there's the ascendant. And then you go around second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. I lost count somewhere. You get up to the 12th house. So this is see one of them.
Very interesting. She has her north
Yeah.
node conjunct her ascendant, right?
Yeah, which she does.
Same here, so do I. And I've been reading into that. That is a major, especially through Vedic astrology, the North Node, Rahu conjunct your ascendant.
Mhm.
Rahu is like or North Node is like a disruptor. It's discordant, disrupting energy, and it can often interfere with your normal way of expressing yourself through the ascendant.
Which that interpretation, by the way, is like so not the Western interpretation of the North.
Yeah, it's completely through.
So I've not been able to, like, balance that out for a while now, how it could be so completely different.
Well, but keep in mind too what they do in Vedic astrology, because they're only using the 7 visible planets and the 2 nodes. They take a much more fated, predictive approach to their astrology. But they're also looking then at, which house is which lord in, and what is their relationship to the other lords, because they have a
Correct.
long list of rules, so that you have to figure how they're literally balancing the weight of each planet based upon the sign and house that it's in, or in determining how positive or negative a chart may be.
You have to
And
also
while
get the mythology behind Vedic astrology. The Vedic, you've got the Vedic literature and all the deities of from 5,000 years ago, the gods, the goddesses. That is the mythology behind the Vedic astrology, which is completely different from like Western astrology, Iranian astrology. But
That's right.
there's also commonality, which being the stars and the constellations themselves. That's where there's an intersection. But the mythological origins differ.
their mythology is very different.
So James, or anyone, James, that north node, going back to that north node on the ascendant, and you were saying it was fated. Would you say that this is a sign of a fated life?
Um,
Well, I think it's fated with a certain energy field that has to be honored. I think if you go with the idea that it's an energy field and the energy field is divided into 2 different polarities, I think you then get into a discussion of which of these polarities is the one truly dominant, and they're not going to go along with that idea. That's just mine.
okay. All right. So it's getting late. I don't want to, yeah. Okay.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, trying to wrap it up. So at any rate, so with the slideshow, here are Trump's charts. Koch and Placidus equal whole, Fagan Allen, Lahiri, north and south, Vedic. Some summary points. So neither tropical sidereal nor Vedic astrology is based on the 12 constellations. A long time ago, there may have been a connection, but that connection was lost 2,000 years ago. Tropical, sidereal, and Vedic all use 12 houses, which are similar in characteristics. We see that there are some differences with Vedic. Tropical and sidereal are pretty much the same. Tropical and sidereal allow the use of different house systems to determine house cusps, but Vedic astrology only uses whole sign, that is 30-degree houses equal to 30-degree signs. So the signs and houses are the same. So you don't see any, the only house cusp that might show up is the ascendant, is identified, but it's always showing as part of the first house and whatever sign is on the first house. Now, different types of astrology, such as horary or medical or mundane, they may suggest a specific house system to use. And that kind of, you'll find that somewhere, or probably if you're reading a book on horary astrology, if they're going to recommend or suggest a specific house system, they will tell you pretty much up front which house system they're using. Tropical astrology is solar based with zero areas equal to the spring equinox. That's what our calendars run off of. It's the sun and the 12 months of the year. And this dates back to the time of Ptolemy and the Greeks. Sidereal astrology uses the same calendar but precesses the zodiac. However, there are different sidereal methods for calculating the degree of precession, and not all sidereal charts are created equal. So that's what I'm showing you. With Fagan Allen and Lahiri, probably two of the more common ones, there's a difference of almost 1 degree in the placement of things. And Vedic astrology also precesses the equinox. Most common method that they use seems to be Lahiri. For natal astrology, there is no single correct, best, or right house system to use. Most astrologers use the house system they learned astrology with. For fun and games, erect your chart using different house systems and then consider which one seems to best reflect who you are or your life as you've lived it, based on house placements and emphasis. And just remember, houses aren't signs and signs aren't constellations. They got the same names, but they're not the constellations, because constellations differ in size significantly. Here's a list of some of the books I have that deal. There's the rulership book, and the book of rulerships by Dr. Lehman. Actually, since Jim, God, what was his name? Used to do the annual planetary guide. Jim Maynard doesn't do it anymore. The only one that I'm aware of that's available is the one from Llewellyn. It's pretty good. Not quite as good as Maynard's, but it's still pretty good. And it does give you, information on the basics of the planets, the signs, and the houses. And the aspects, which is kind of nice, And so there's a list of books. Here's some more books. There's some websites that I used and referred to. You can learn a lot from astro.com, AstroWiki. They go through all the planets, the signs, the houses. They talk about the different house systems, if you want to know a little bit more about them. Okay, tentatively, next month, 12 signs, their history, mythology. And we may, get down to see where we are with election predictions, because it'll be our last chance. On the 10th, it's basically open mic astrology. We'll deal with your questions. We'll look at the results of the election as they stand at that point in time, which just 5 days afterwards may not have an answer yet. December 8th, we'll look at the forecast for 25. So a link to the video recording will be sent out as soon as it's available. And a copy of the PDF will be uploaded to the Facebook page, but I'll send it to anybody who would like a copy. Just drop me an email, jimmy_eddie@hotmail.com. Thank you for joining us and your continued support. Take care, be safe, stay well. That's the end of the slideshow. Where's everybody? Here we are. Thank you all for hanging in there.
Great show. A lot of work. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Jim's
Michelle,
a
you've been pretty
true
quiet down there. What?
It's just a lot of info. It's just a lot. It's just a lot.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of food for thought.
I-
Unfortunately, or fortunately, that's the way that's my Virgo brain working for you. Virgo Sun, Virgo Mercury at 0 Virgo. So yeah, that's just the way it works.
It's the
But
nature
yeah,
of astrology to go fast, like, and have a lot of information thrown at you also.
yeah. Unfortunately, in my brain, there's no such thing as TMI.
What's TMI?
It just all gets in there and filters around and
Yeah.
comes out, in different ways and shapes and forms. But yeah, but thank you for showing up. Thank you for joining us today. Any last minute questions, comments, thoughts, requests for something for us to talk about next year? Got any puzzlements, anything that you're exploring that you'd like us to go into more, or that you might want to present to the group as an idea? Just let us know.
Well, how about Neptune going into Aries? That seems to me like a very
That's something, yes, we should talk about that certainly in December, if nothing else. Because
Good
it's going to
idea.
step in and then step back out and come back in again. So yeah.
I gotta go, people. Take care.
Bye, Spencer. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
as always. Ladies,
Thank
any
you.
last minute thoughts or things?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'd like to examine the Aries vortex.
Aries vortex?
Yes. It comes up
Um,
25. It's when you
oh,
have the conjunction of Neptune and Saturn,
in Aries. Oh, yes, at 0 Aries. Yes,
right at your Aries, which is sextile Pluto on one side and Uranus on the other side.
yes.
It seems like that's supposed to be a tremendous happening that's never happened
Uh,
before.
Ah,
not in anybody's lifetime, that's for sure. It would have been a long time ago.
Right.
Probably back before our computers could calculate. Yeah, okay. Yes, it'll be on the agenda.
Thank you
Okay.
very much, Jim, for all
Thank
your
you, Jim.
work.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you all for sticking with me and continuing to support us and be here for us. Appreciate it.
interesting.
Cornelia and I live here in hot Southern California, where the only thing we got to say for the fact that it's really hot is the fact that we don't have any major fires burning right around us.
Right.
I don't even know what it's 110 or something like that today. I don't know if it got hotter than that, but yeah, it's been
110
yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
we've been around 110 for the last couple 3-4
in
days.
Santa Monica?
Not Santa Monica. Santa Monica's a little cooler, probably, more like 90, 95.
Oh,
I'm in the valley.
oh, okay. Wow, 110.
Yeah.
That's hotter than
I mean,
Sedona.
LA has hit 100. LA broke 100. So then
Wow.
yeah, just inland from Santa Monica a little ways. So Santa Monica's probably, yes, it's been bloody hot here. Very, very hot. Burbank set a new record high in, I think on Wednesday or Thursday. I think Woodland Hills is maybe setting a record today or something. I'm not sure what it's actually is. Let me see what if any of my phone apps want to talk about. I'm going to stop the recording now, if that's all right with everybody, since
Yeah.
Yes.
thank you all, and hang on, don't go away. Yes.